On December 1st, the car of a military employee of the secret Rostec, a developer of laser systems, was blown up in Moscow. In the Black Sea, Sea Baby drones blew up 2 tankers belonging to Russia's Shadow Fleet. There is panic in Moscow. The Novorossiysk oil port was also attacked again. Revolted. In Dagestan, an attack on the Caspian Flotilla, a naval enterprise, new explosions at oil refineries in the Saratov and Ryazan regions. And near Taganrog, strategic Tu-95 MS are burning. Yes, the plane, they fucked me up. Fuck. And again, an accident at launch. The nuclear Sarmatian exploded.
Oh, fuck.
Let's discuss all of this with well-known military analyst Roman Svetan. December 1st. What do you think about explosions in central Moscow where a Rostec military scientist's car was blown up? What do you say?
The operation continues. Liquidation, it's been going on for 12 years. It started in 2014. It began with all the people involved. In Russia, it doesn't matter. Anyone involved in terrorist attacks against Ukraine, anyone who somehow helped the Russian army in the killing of 500,000, we can already say Ukrainians. And in this war, which has already lasted 11 years, naturally, they will be eliminated by our special services. It's only a matter of time. We've actually been talking about this with you for more than a year now. This operation is ongoing and will continue until the last terrorist is gone. And there are simply too many of them. There's no point in putting them on trial. It would overwhelm the entire judicial system. As soon as they come into the sights of our special services, they are immediately eliminated. There is simply no other option. And especially lately, there have been more and more of these attacks targeting members of Russian special services, as well as Russian scientists, who are also involved in the entire chain of production and terrorist strikes. In Ukraine, these attacks on Russians will continue. For the next 15 to 20 years, of course, our guys in the special services will have to keep working. Mainly, this involves the State Security Service, the Foreign Intelligence Service, Special Operations Forces, several tens of thousands of well-trained personnel from these agencies who for the next 15 to 20 years will be searching for, tracking, and eliminating these Russian terrorists. There are different mechanisms. One of them, well, right now we're talking about Moscow.
Yes, Moscow will burn. All war criminals will be targeted. Roman Egorovich, Dagestan, and Kaspiysk, an attack on military facilities. What is known? In Kaspiysk, drones targeted facilities of the Caspian Flotilla. The likely targets, according to the armed forces, were the Caspian Precision Mechanics Plant, which produces equipment for ships and submarines, and Dag Diesel, which produces naval underwater weapons for the Russian Navy. The head of Dagestan has officially confirmed the attack. Roman Egorovich, how serious is the strike on Kaspiysk? Let's break it down.
We've already carried out operations in the North Caucasus more than once, and now we've reached the Caspian direction. The Caspian flotilla consists of several dozen ships of the Russian Navy, and among them are a few ships capable of launching caliber missiles. For us, it's very important, of course, to be able to reach this direction. In addition, the Caspian direction is now on the list. In general, the Caspian area has the capability to transfer Russian naval ships here via the Volga, through the Volga-Don Canal, through the Don, to the Azov and Black Sea waters both ways, and even to the Baltic as well. By the way, there's a network of canals and rivers there, so they can also transfer ships to the Baltic through several lakes from the north. That's why Russia's 3 seas are practically connected by waterways. The Caspian, Azov, Black, and Baltic seas. Naturally, it's important for us to be able to reach each of them. The GUR somehow managed to reach the Baltic, but right now it's the Caspian direction that's under attack. They found something there, though honestly, you don't have to look too hard. These are factories left over from the Soviet Union that used to produce, among other things, torpedoes. For us, it's very important, of course, to take out this direction. At least now we've laid a pipeline to them. Drones, of course, are targeting the Caspian flotilla. I think that since they've established a route, it means they found ways to get through the Russian frontline air defenses, either directly in the frontline area or by coming in from the sea. That's also possible in the area around Novorossiysk or Sochi. In other words, you can come in further north and travel along the North Caucasus, reaching its eastern part toward Dagestan, which is exactly where the Caspian flotilla is.
And what is dog diesel? Please explain to our audience who are not military experts. It says here that they develop naval underwater weapons for the Navy. So how important and critical are these facilities for the Russian Navy?
Torpedoes. It was this plant that produced torpedoes. Well, at least it produces torpedoes. That's why they're important to us, of course. Naturally, also diesel engines for diesel electric submarines, mainly for the Varshavyanka project, by the way. There are still 3 of these submarines left in the Black Sea. And of course, torpedoes are very important to us. So destroying any such equipment is crucial, since our Toloka drones are expected to start operating against Russian ports soon. Toloka are underwater drones, basically mini submarines, I would say. The GOR did a good job on the Ka-27 helicopters, which are specifically anti-submarine aircraft. A helicopter that can track a submarine, a mini submarine, or even a Toloka drone, it's basically the same thing. And naturally, the torpedoes that those same Varshavyanka class submarines are equipped with can also destroy them underwater. That's why it's so important to disrupt all these chains, of course. But here is one of, it's an attempt for now. This is just the very beginning, the first routes along which eventually a significant number of drones are supposed to go.
There's another important attack that everyone is talking about. It's in the Black Sea. 2 tankers from Russia's Shadow Fleet have been destroyed. They were severely damaged, blown up, and are burning. Sibebi maritime drones attacked the sanctioned Shadow oil tankers Kyra and Birat. The operation was a joint effort by the Security Service of Ukraine and the Ukrainian Navy. They used upgraded drones with enhanced warheads. Roman Grigorievich, is this a serious blow to Russia's Shadow Fleet, to their oil logistics, and to the financing of the war? What will be the impact?
The Russians have about 1,000 ships, specifically around 1,000 in their Shadow Fleet, so 2 is just the beginning. If you want to deal a truly serious blow to their transshipment and transfer operations, you need to take out at least 1/3 of their fleet. That means about 300 ships need to be sunk or put out of commission at a minimum. Even 1 or 2 strikes on ships, this very level has raised the price of insurance policies to about $10 per barrel. That's a lot for Russia. For some of their operations, they have so-called complex horizons for oil extraction. Sometimes the production cost reaches $40 to $45. If you add another $10 per barrel on top, let's say, for these insurance payments, and they did go up, I repeat, after our drone strikes, then essentially Russian oil becomes unprofitable for the Russian treasury. So that's the kind of effective move you get even from just 2 strikes. But in reality, to completely stop the traffic, you would need to take out at least 4 European ones. Transshipment hubs, meaning those around St. Petersburg, there are Primorsk and Ust-Luga, then around Novorossiysk, the Novorossiysk hub, and they also have one Far Eastern port, which mainly pumps towards China, and from there to India. Sometimes it goes there, but that direction is minor. But if you take out those 4 terminal networks, well, then you could completely stop the export flow of petrodollars into the Russian treasury. Plus, at the same time, of course, sink those tankers that are trying to make money off our misfortune.
Roman Grigorievich, one of the most interesting news items, the accident involving the intercontinental missile Sarmat, which, as I understand it, can carry a nuclear warhead. This is part of the nuclear triad. As I understand, these tests took place in recent days, and the Sarmat intercontinental missile exploded again after being launched from the Yasny base. The video was very vivid, everyone shared it. All the missile tests in Russia in recent years, for some reason, end in accidents. Russia is unable to put ICBMs on combat duty. Your turn. To the first year. What do you think?
The Russians have a problem, especially after recently, probably more than a week ago, one of the main designers of the Topol missiles passed away. They practically have no design base left, meaning there are hardly any people who could actually build a serious missile. Because the Sarmat is a serious missile, it's on the same level as the Voyevoda. If you look at the classification, for example, the Topol missile, Topol itself is an old Soviet development, but it's a good, excellent missile. Based on it, it's practically the same Topal, just with a MIRVed warhead, YARS. That's the R-24 missile. The R-26 missile is the Rubezh. That's the same Oreshnik. And the Sarmat is the R-28 missile. But This direction is more about, still from our general line of missiles, there's also the SS-18. At one time, we had a good lineup. The SS-18 missiles, Satan, that's the R-36 missile, then the R-36M and the R-36M2 Voyevoda. Right now, the Russians have it. The R-36M2 Voyevoda is on combat duty with the Russians, but that's a Dnipro-made missile. It was serviced by people from Dnipro because after the Russians began large-scale offensive operations, naturally all that maintenance was lost to the Russians, and now they're trying to create a new missile, Sarmat. It's actually based on the Voyevoda R-36M2 missile, although internally it's classified as the R-28. It didn't work out, but they still can't get it to work. Starting from the mortar launch, the so-called silo launch, which is similar to a mortar, meaning the charge ejects it. Then the main engine of the missile is supposed to ignite and guide the missile along a certain trajectory. But in this case, at least the last time, the missile didn't even really launch properly. Basically, it fell right there. It couldn't stay airborne. And the Russians have had several launches of the Sarmat like this, 5 or 6 unsuccessful ones. And in fact, several Sarmats destroyed their silos, so they were out of commission for several years. They destroyed all the silos. They can't even lift off from the launch pad. So the problem is with the design. It's an engineering issue, and most likely it won't work. In other words, the missile program has gone nowhere. So you could say you can put a big cross over Russia's missile program. They won't be able to make any more real effective missiles.
Roman Nikolaevich, everyone understands perfectly well that Russia uses this nuclear blackmail, constantly threatening Europe and the US with its nuclear club. But what do such test failures actually mean for Russia's nuclear potential? Is it possible that the nuclear power the whole world knows about doesn't actually match reality? How can one verify the number of nuclear weapons Russia has and whether those weapons are operational? After all, everyone is so afraid of Russia's nuclear potential.
The thing is, back in the 1990s, the Americans took part in building almost all of Russia's nuclear storage facilities, the strategic ones. That's a fact. Moreover, they were involved in supplying certain refrigeration equipment there. Naturally, just imagine if they set up all these processes for the Russians, then they definitely know exactly what's happening at those nuclear sites. What's more, there's close contact with the 12th GUMO of the Russian army. That's the 12th main directorate of the Ministry of Defense, which keeps all nuclear munitions under strict control. So it's clear they have nuclear weapons. The total number is over 5,000. There are nuclear warheads, but a certain restoration cycle has been disrupted there. That's right, because a nuclear warhead, I think every 30 years or so, is supposed to be almost completely remelted. Why? Because there's a certain decay of these nuclear elements and the percentage of content needs to be increased. The Russians aren't doing this, so in reality, no one knows how many will actually detonate. Even the Russians themselves don't know how many of these nuclear warheads will work, and that's the problem. Why Glasha? Well, it's an entire process trying to send 5,000 warheads for remelting or refurbishment, roughly speaking. Well, that's practically impossible. That's one thing. And the second is the delivery systems. The whole point is really in the delivery systems for this nuclear weapon. And with the delivery systems, the Russians already have a problem, as we can see. At most 2 missiles. That's all they have left. And even the Yars Oreshnik, it's out of commission. It's a kinetic weapon. Well, now they're trying to launch the Sarmat. That's it. Well, the Voyevoda will still remain on combat duty for a certain amount of time, but it will be decommissioned. The Voyevoda R-36M2, and that's all. So the Russians have just a handful of static nuclear delivery systems left. Yes, in total, somehow, they may technically cover Russia's nuclear capabilities, but in reality, there won't be anything new. That is, one could say that there is simply a gradual fading of the Russian nuclear triad, especially after we took out several Russian strategic bombers through Operation Spider's Web. The Russians have big problems with submarines. The ill-fated Kursk, which tragically sank, begins its story, and there are significant problems with some of the very latest launches, causing considerable concern. Because the Russians have this nuclear issue, it's just fading away and fading away. Well, as always, Putin, he wants to show that things are not as bad as they used to be when you were 70 or in the 80s and 80s. They're already running around with this nuclear club like a fool with a mortar. There is no point. Well, everyone already perfectly understands where Russia is heading when it comes to nuclear issues.
Roman Nikolaevich, Taganrog, Rostov-on-Don, flashes from air defense systems and a series of explosions. There were a series of strikes and explosions in Taganrog and near Rostov. Russians were sharing videos showing air defense systems operating under a drone. What could have been targeted? Because so far there is no official information, only eyewitness reports about powerful explosions.
They are finishing off from the Taganrog direction. Look, the main military logistics to Donbass goes through Taganrog. The railway from Rostov goes to Taganrog. It passes through the Milsky Bay, the Milus River, then further through the Kalmius, and then continues westward towards the Pokrovska direction, as well as the eastern and Zaporizhzhia fronts, that is along the railway. This is the main hub, and it's electrified, so they will definitely target the traction substations, the substations plus, and in Taganrog, there's the Beriev Scientific and Production Association, where Russian specialists are trying to modernize aircraft of a certain level there. And the same goes for the A-50, A-60, as we've mentioned, and the so-called A-100. They tried to upgrade to the A-100. There are also Tu-95s in the hangars there. They brought in 3 of them. And now, most likely, our forces are finishing off the hangars. You can't see them from the outside, which means they're inside 1, or rather 3 hangars. There are several hangars there. I think right now they're going to finish off all the hangars, that's for sure. All those Tu-95s will be put out of action. They won't be able to take off from there anymore. And then there's the airfield's technical equipment itself, if we're talking specifically about the airfield that services this Beria R&D facility. Because there are plenty of targets there to hit and reach, especially since there's a range of 150 to 180 kilometers, there are means to reach it. And the bars are working, we've got good ones. Now there's a new missile, a missile drone with a jet engine. It's been fitted with wings. And of course, our main missiles are the Neptunes. The Neptune can reach Taganrog quite well, pierces through the Russian air defense they've deployed in Donbass, and accomplishes its combat mission. In fact, the latest footage from near Taganrog is precisely the work of our Neptunes.
So in other words, the Tu-95 MS strategic bombers are, so to speak, under threat?
3 of them probably won't be coming out anymore, because our guys won't rest until they've finished them off in their hangars. So you can already count -3 strategic bombers in the overall tally.
Roman Nikolaevich, the Saratov oil refinery is burning. I've lost count of our hits. How many times have we hit it?
Saratov is also one of the main directions for us. Of course, the oil refining unit, this cracking facility that's already about 100 years old, it produces, we've probably reached it about a dozen times already. Why is this particular direction important? Because Saratov, the Volga, Engels, and the airfield, again, the same Tu-95s, Tu-160s, and also Su-34s, Su-35s. The Russians have transferred them from Baltimore, from Voronezh to Engels, and from Borisoglepsk, they've sent them there as well. That's why this direction is important to us for at least 3 locations. The first is, of course, the airfield itself. The second is the oil refinery. Next to the airfield, there's a fuel and lubricants depot, which is supplied by this Saratov plant via the Volga. They transferred them, and there you go. Fuel and lubricants are immediately supplied. Well, there are also 2 other major facilities there, and we definitely need to reach them. Right under Engels, there's a significantly large amount of aviation kerosene stockpiled, specifically TS1 and TS8. We're talking hundreds of thousands of tons there. And it's a critical supply. Several dozen, quite a few serious caisson tanks filled with this aviation kerosene, the so-called strategic reserve for Russian long-range aviation. Plus, south of Engels, several dozen kilometers along the left bank of the Volga, there's Saratov 63. And that's already a nuclear storage facility, or more precisely, a storage site for tactical and strategic nuclear munitions. This is exactly the 12th main directorate of the Russian Federation that controls it. Because there are definitely reasons to fly there, I would put it that way. We will keep working on this direction with you every week.
Roman Ilinich, apart from the Russian Shadow Fleet tankers in the Black Sea that were attacked, I would like to highlight separately, as a separate topic, the repeated attack on Novorossiysk this month. Because at the same time, on those very days, the Novorossiysk oil terminal was attacked. So there was a separate strike on the Shadow Fleet, and a separate one on the port of Novorossiysk. What do you think?
Well, it was an external device. Secondly, it was attacked by our backs. It's also called the oil beacon. We've talked about this with you so many times. What exactly should be targeted in Novorossiysk? Precisely the oil beacon. It's a buoy floating in the sea connected to an oil pipeline, and tankers can dock to it. then they can load up with oil and leave. Those two tankers that our security services hit were actually there to load up at that very oil buoy. They were heading there empty, going in dry to load up, which is why they were intercepted earlier. So probably the same kind of environmental disaster won't happen there. It's unlikely, but still they intercept them. But ideally, of course, the berths themselves should be taken out. That is all the mooring equipment of various types, including the remote ones, like this remote one.
As for the situation in St. Petersburg, they're reporting that there are large-scale disruptions. Mobile internet outages have started en masse in St. Petersburg. Telegram and WhatsApp aren't working, operators are confirming it, and only a white list of apps is functioning. This was a reaction to the leak of conversations in Shagovo involving a key Russian diplomat. Russian authorities have accelerated the blocking of the entire internet across Russia, including WhatsApp, believing that this platform is involved in leaking diplomatic negotiations. What do you think is happening, and why is Russia cutting off access to internet messengers? It's all about control. Is it panic, an attempt to hide strikes, or a move to prepare for new military actions?
Who in their right mind would discuss things over WhatsApp anyway? For $100,000, they'll give you any conversation you want. Even a conversation from 10 years ago or however long ago it started, the owners will leak it. WhatsApp can be cracked in no time, as they say. This is pure business because you'd have to be a complete idiot to use WhatsApp for conversations unless it's for disinformation. If you need to feed disinformation to all the eavesdroppers, then sure, you can talk about anything on WhatsApp. But if you want to do it privately, well, there are many other messengers starting with Signal and ending with Wicca. If only the comrades knew this, but they clearly don't. That's why most likely WhatsApp is used precisely so that conversations can be recorded and blame can be shifted onto someone else. Why? Let me repeat once again. $100,000. For any conversation, the owners of WhatsApp will sell you out. Roman Nikolaevich.
And now a very important topic that I wanted to bring up at the end. The Wall Street Journal reports that Russia has seized the initiative in the drone war. For the first time in the entire war, Russia has gained an advantage in combat drones, writes the Wall Street Journal. Russia has learned to strike supply lines, hunt down Ukrainian FPV drone pilots, and use longer-range devices. Commander Yuri Fedorenko, Achilles, says they are disrupting our logistics and specifically targeting the pilots. Due to losses, Ukrainian operators are forced to launch FPVs farther from the front line, reducing the effectiveness of attacks. So let's talk about this.
The Russians initially had a pretty solid base in radio electronics, inherited from the Soviet Union, and later strengthened by Chinese engineers to quite a serious level. Now, you could say it dominates the battlefield. It's the entire radio electronic system at various levels, from electronic warfare systems to drones and so on. Especially when it comes to drones, the assistance is coming from China. It's very significant, both technological and naturally manufacturing support as well, making it hard to surpass or outdo them. And well, it's quite difficult at this stage, very difficult, meaning there's no longer any parity. The Russians have already pulled ahead before. In the past, you were ahead in some areas, but now the Russians have pulled ahead in almost every aspect. That's why we have to look for new mechanisms, somehow adapt to this situation and ramp up production. And it's not just about increasing production. We also need to boost creativity as well. We've gotten a bit stuck. That's a subtle hint. We've stalled on new mechanisms that could be used along the line of contact. It's very important for us to create a zone on the front line, especially now for about 3 years, while we work on breaking Russia apart with deep strikes. Economically, for the next 3 years, we need serious kill zones and we need to expand them. Right now, it's about 10 to 12 kilometers, but ideally, of course, it needs to reach the level of army rear areas, 30 to 50 kilometers. Our partners are helping us a lot right now, especially the Europeans, and by the way, the Canadians as well. They're supplying us with operational level drones. The main issue is the quantity. So we just need to increase the numbers since these operational drones are under direct control. 50, 60, 70 kilometers. That's the effective operational range. If we have a lot of them, then essentially we can overpower the Russians with this particular type of equipment at least. And then we'll see what comes next. We'll go from there. 100 to 150 kilometers, at least up to the range of direct communication, which is about 150 kilometers, especially with relays. You can, in principle, reach and expand that zone to about that level, but that's more of a strategic matter. At the very least, this kind of planning needs to be done.
Roman Nikolaevich, Yesterday, I read that military analysts are predicting that Russia, given its production of missiles and drones, could carry out attacks like the one it did this past Friday, twice a week. That is massive attacks on Kyiv, ballistic and cruise missiles, plus drones twice a week. But the situation is getting worse because before they were able to do this, well, I don't know, maybe twice a month, and now it's twice a week. So where is our response?
Well, our response is in Mindich's pocket. He ran off with it, stole the money, and ran away. That's where our response is. We have some good videos about ballistics. We have plenty of announcements. Oh, for the second year now, these announcements are just, I don't even know. We already have ballistic missiles lined up in such a series that the Americans are on edge. But these are still just announcements. There are no ballistic announcements. You can't bombard Moscow with this kind of production. Do we need ballistics? There are no ballistics. And there are no ballistics because that's the executive power, that's for sure. All sorts of Alibabas, Chebureks, and all the rest of that riffraff. They did everything. Everyone did everything for it, even stole the money. The last ones ran off to Israel. It's the Israeli mafia in this sense. Most likely they took money from the Muscovites, again, from that same Israeli mafia that ran Moscow. They took money for promising to do everything possible to make sure Ukraine wouldn't have ballistic missiles that could reach Moscow. And they succeeded in that. They've been in power for 7 years now, and for at least 2 years they've overstayed since May 6th of last year, from the 21st. There's a big question about their legitimacy, but nevertheless, they did everything possible to make sure we had nothing to strike back at Moscow with. But we should only be striking at Moscow. All of Russia is of no interest to anyone. All the riffraff is gathered in Moscow. The main bosses of the Israeli mafia are also sitting in Moscow. They secured themselves with the help of the Mindichis, the Zuckermans, and all the others, the Abramoviches and the Rotenbergs. They have ensured their own safety. That's why, until we change the executive power, because changing the political power is very difficult, we need to stop the hostilities, which in no case should be done. Get involved in the so-called election race, tear the country apart by registration, but the executive power can be replaced in 2 to 4 hours. Send all the Shmihal team to the front. They've been expected there for a long time, and bring the OSR into the executive branch, as we've discussed before, the officers of the strategic reserve into the cabinet of ministers. That is, we have a large pool, hundreds of colonels and generals who graduated from the General Staff Academy, who attended lectures there, and quite serious lectures on managing the state during wartime. These are the people who need to be brought into the cabinet. Then, believe me, we will have ballistic weapons. For now, while they're trying to produce ballistic missiles, they've just taken money for their production. The company that used to produce at one time, a film company that made videos, promos, sat in on castings. Well, what do you expect? That's the main problem. The main problem, of course, is the Israeli mafia that has infiltrated our government. It needs to be eradicated because you see what they're doing. They stole and went to Israel, stole and went to Israel. There, everyone is considered one of their own. Right now, they're trying to protect Netanyahu from corruption charges through the president of Israel. There are already several criminal cases following Netanyahu, specifically for corruption. By the way, it is most likely that this is precisely why Benjamin Netanyahu initiated this significant war machine in the Middle Eastern region, primarily to maintain his grip on power, ensuring that these pervasive corruption scandals would not ultimately tear him apart and lead to his downfall. That's the problem. We have an issue with the Israeli mafia in our country. It's the same one in Moscow, and now it's in Washington too. Part of this Israeli mafia has taken over the White House. Tvitkov and Kushner and all the rest, all those other Levites with their associates, who are certainly not our comrades.
Friends, please like this video and write a few kind words in the comments in support of Ukraine and Ukraine's armed forces. Share your thoughts on the overall situation, on the strikes by Ukraine's armed forces, and of course on the ongoing terrorist attacks against Ukraine. 3 times a week, I meet with the well-known military analyst Roman Svetan on my YouTube channel to discuss military and political events. Roman Grigorievich, thank you, and as usual, see you this Wednesday.
Goodbye.